All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the createTED podcast. And I am gonna change my view here for just a second so you can see both of us. Well, we'll leave it because I think it's switching to me. But I'm super excited to have on today uh, friend and author Heidi Tucker. I had the chance to interview Heidi before when I was the host for the LDS PMA podcast. If you haven't listened to any of their shows, they're great. Connie Sokol has been the host for the last little while, and she has put out some phenomenal interviews with great guests, and they have some other guests, another host coming up soon. So tune in for them. But Heidi, I'm going to go ahead and have you just briefly introduce yourself, and then we'll jump right in.
Yeah, absolutely. Heidi Tucker, and I am an award-winning author. I love to do speaking events as well. And I've got five books out and waiting to see what direction I go in my future.
That's awesome. It'll be fun to come back and talk about that. Now, one of the reasons I did get an interview Heidi before, but I wanted her to come on this show just to talk about the things that she's been doing about her creative journey. Because in talking to her, I know that there are strategic choices that she's made to be on kind of just the creative path that she's on, but she's also been very disruptive and innovative in the choices she's making as far as how she accomplishes her time. But Heidi, help us understand, you know, because right now I know that you started with your own story, but then you kind of transitioned into helping other people tell their story. Because a lot of us will think, we either need to come up with stories, if we're in the fiction world, or we need to tell our own story or something that's happened in our life. And that's where you started, but then you decided to focus on helping other people tell their stories. And by the way, listeners, she does a fantastic job at that. And actually, one of your books just recently, one of the books you helped with just recently won an award.
Yeah, A Necessary Lie, Escape for Freedom and Love. It's this true story of a husband and wife who escaped from North Korea. And it's an incredible story. But yes, it's won four different awards last year. So I'm really proud of that.
That's
But
awesome.
yeah, the jump into doing other people's stories happened after my first book. I did my first book. It was truly a calling, I feel like, a spiritual prompting that got me on the road to doing that first book.
Hmm.
Um, and so shortly after that, I had someone approach me who asked me if I would help them write their story. And I really didn't want to do that, but I talked to her a little bit about that. And in the process, quickly understood that I needed to do that. And so that was very different because it involves, lengthy interviews.
Mm.
It's note taking, it's recording conversations, and then you have to just lay the whole thing out in front of you and say, what is the order of events here? How am I going to tell this so that it's truthful and so that it's inspirational and respectful to that person? And so that's been a really different kind of a brain switch for me to do that.
Mm.
And I've done that with my last four books.
Okay. Yeah, and it's been really interesting just to read little bits of it and to talk to you about them and just to see because that is a different way to approach it and to tackle a story because you're not telling yours. You're trying to be very true, but there's still important stories to tell. What are in that because you made that your initial choice? I think this is where I want to have us go because sometimes when we make a specific strategic choice, it gets challenging to stick to that and to remember why we're doing what we're doing. What are some of the walk us through kind of a little more what that process is like and what some of the challenges you've run into and then how you've kind of worked through those challenges.
I would say that you always have to go back to your why. With every single book, it's different. And I have to find the why on why I'm willing to sacrifice my time because I work a full-time job that's not have doesn't have anything to do with writing, right?
Mm,
And so I've got to squeeze, I got to wiggle this writing position that I'm in around that. And so it has to be a why that will give me incentive to give up my personal time, to sacrifice time with my family, all of it. And there are challenges that come along the way. When you're interviewing someone to write their story, sometimes they want to just give me the general outline. They want to give me sort of the surface of,
mm,
and I'm not interested in the surface. I want the details and the emotions. And essentially, I need to write a story when I feel like it's almost become mine. I've interviewed
mm,
and interviewed and interviewed to the point that it is in my heart and soul. And that's when I sit down and write to tell it. I don't start from the beginning. I do months or even years, depending on the book, of interviews before I will begin writing. And
wow.
so the clue for that is really to get the person to develop a relationship between the two of us enough that I
Mhm,
can pull them into areas that they don't want to talk about
mm,
because it's painful. And, most of all of my books really deal with tragic things that happen to these people and how they're able to rise up from the ashes of despair
mm.
and tragedy and go on to make a real difference in the world. And they kind of want to talk about the rise,
Yeah.
not necessarily go back and talk about the tragedy because that's painful. But
Mm,
I need to know that. And for you as a reader, you need to know that too,
mm.
because you won't ever appreciate the rise until you understand the depth that they were at.
Yeah.
So that I would say is my biggest challenge. Um, Outlining is always a challenge. Um, right? You outline and then you outline again and then you outline again. I mean, it's continuously outlining. And the other thing too, with me working full time in an entirely other position, I I have limited time to write. And so I have to sort of train my brain and my focus that we are ready to write. I'm going to give myself an hour of time
Mhm,
or 2 hours of time here. And here we go. And so there have been some little tricks that I've done to make that work. There's music that I play through my computer that is soft instrumental music that works for me, unless I'm writing. There was one time I was writing a chapter about someone in a thunderstorm. It was thunderstorming outside, and it was this horrific low moment of their life, and where they were actually contemplating suicide. And so I went on to Pandora and I found thunderstorm music.
mm.
And I played that in the background as I wrote that chapter. But for the most part, I have this soft music playing. I close my door. I turn off my emails so that they are not, dinging in on my computer. And I just say to myself, the whole focus right now is writing, and that's whether I write one paragraph or one page or one whole chapter. It doesn't matter. It's going to be different, but I'm going to focus. And pretty soon my brain has learned, like when I turn on that Pandora station
Mm.
that has that music, I can I can feel a switch in my brain that's like, oh, she's an author right now.
Yeah.
This is author time. And it's been very productive. I've been to writing seminars before where people have said they burn a certain candle or
Mm.
incense or something, and it triggers something in them as well by smell. They
Yeah.
smell that, the brain goes, okay, I'm in author mode. So whatever it takes, but it helps for me to do it in short spurts that are focused,
Mm.
and I'm able to accomplish it that way and not give up the rest of my day because I'm not able to do that.
That's awesome. That's great advice. And I love that because that's one of the things I've noticed and I've been really surprised is even with just 15 minutes a day, you'd be surprised what you can accomplish. And at first, it doesn't feel like you're doing much in 15 minutes. But then you get in that routine, that creation routine of, okay, I've got 15 minutes. I'm gonna see what I can produce. And then you get used to that. And then you know, okay, I know where I'm gonna pick up and I'm gonna keep going, whether that's your writing or your doing any kind of art form. You know, you could be painting, you could be drawing. That
Hmm.
15 minutes, because then if 15 minutes is all you have, then 15 minutes is all you have. But usually what happens is in that small window, you don't want to stop because you keep going. You're like, hey, I've got a thought. I want to finish or this idea I want to capture. And you just keep going. So that
Yeah.
15 minutes keeps us going. So that's great advices of not just how to, get that time in, but also how to be consistent and how to just keep going. So I think that's great advice. And I love that
Yeah.
you led with, hey, I have a 40-hour a week job that I do on the side. Because I think for a
Mhm.
lot of listeners, that's where they are. They
Yeah.
aren't a full-time artist, that paints in their studio full-time. They're not a full-time author that is devoted just to that and they're going on book tours.
Yeah. How would that be? Be full-time? I mean,
Yeah.
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 Yeah. It doesn't pay my bills. My other job pays my bills. So
Yeah. And I'll throw this out there that even for the people who it is their full-time job, they
yeah,
struggle with the same thing. They have to
for
find
sure.
that rhythm of, okay, I know when I come here in this setting, this is, it's game on. I need to sit down or stand up. I've got to do whatever it is I need to do.
Yeah.
Just because we live in a distracted world. It's so easy to get distracted. Um, I struggle with that. It's easy to get distracted, to hop on social media and just next thing you know, 30 minutes have gone by. And you're like, wait a minute. I got in here to check one thing and now like I don't even know how I got here. Like my mind
Exactly.
just like scroll, scroll, scroll.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. I mean, the 15 minutes is important for two reasons. First of all, a month of 15 minutes each day, um, that equals quite a bit.
Yeah.
And it totally resonated with me when you said 15 minutes. There's some days that at 15 minutes you stop or whatever your goal is. But there are other days that at 15 minutes you are on one, right? You are running, you're off and running,
Yeah.
and your brain is there and you're coming up with all kinds of creative ideas and what you want to do. And so if your schedule allows you, that 15 minutes becomes an hour.
Yeah.
And that can be, it's just really successful to be able to run it that way. But the
Yeah.
trick is making that commitment. There was one book, a couple of the books really, that when I got serious into the writing and I really wanted to see it through, um, I got up early and it was the first thing I did in the morning.
Mm.
Fortunately, my full-time job, I work from home. So I can be a little bit flexible, but even if I had to, be at the office, at 9 o'clock or something, I got up early and I devoted, in my pajamas, I just marched into my office, got on my computer, and that was my time. No emails, no phone calls. I didn't look at my phone, nothing, for a couple hours in the morning before work. That helped me really finish a book that was difficult and that I needed to get done. And so it can be done. We can do many things.
Yeah. And I love that because also in that time period, for those of us who are creative, I think everybody's creative has some creative part to their soul, to who they are. But for those of us that are doing art or writing, there's a fulfillment that comes with that in that even if it's only the 15 minutes to where when you're done, you're like, I'm being true to my creative self and I'm
Yeah.
honoring that. And I was really surprised that, when I was really consistent with this, I would sit down at lunch and I just take 15 minutes of lunch and sometimes 30 of an hour break and it would just fly by. And I was amazed. I'm like, wait, how did that much come out in 30 minutes? And sometimes it
Yeah.
was like maybe a page of a small notebook, but I felt like the story moved forward. But then the rest of the day, I was feeling great. I'm like, hey, I'm doing what I want, I'm doing what I want to do. And I just felt a lot of fulfillment. And, we all have jobs that we work. And I have a friend that I've been talking to recently, and he said a lot of his fulfillment, said he loves his job, but the fulfillment doesn't come from that. Like he
Mhm.
wants to like the writing is what he wants to do.
Yeah.
And so when he has those moments to create, like he loves it. That's where so much fulfillment comes from. So
Yeah. It's
it's
endorphin. It's almost endorphins. It's like mental endorphins that hit,
yeah,
at the end of that 15 or 30 minutes. It's like you've just, done a really great run or a really great hike. At the end of that, the way that you feel, that's the way you feel at the end of a writing session if you're using that creativity. And I also really feel sort of on a spiritual level, I'm not sure what your audience is
yeah,
spiritual, but when I'm doing that, I feel like that's my calling.
hmm
And so I feel really blessed and really rewarded for having put in the time to do that.
oh yeah, and
Yeah.
I love that because I totally believe that too. That we're each
Mhm.
given gifts from a loving God,
Yeah.
and we each have something that we need to contribute to bring light into the world. And it
Yeah.
could be art, it could be, whatever. But anytime we honor that,
Hmm.
there is a spiritual fulfillment there,
For
knowing
sure.
that, hey, we're doing what we can to make the world a better place,
Yeah.
to brighten the lives of those within our circle of influence. And
Yeah.
some people we may never meet. But yeah, I thank you for bringing that up. That is, we are all given different talents.
Hmm.
And when we
Yeah.
take,
They look very different,
yeah,
for each of us. And it's our way to contribute and to lift others,
yeah,
bring light into a dark, confusing world. And when we figure out what that calling is for us, and we spend even a little bit of time at it, there's a reward. There's a
yeah.
spiritual and an emotional reward for doing so.
Yeah, this is actually a good pivot point. There's something that you had mentioned earlier, you're doing what you're doing right now, and I think you said you're not sure what's next. And sometimes
Mhm.
with these callings we have, our focus may shift from one thing to another. You
Yeah.
started with you wrote your story and now you're writing other people's stories.
Hmm.
So what do you think is next for you?
I'm trying to figure that out. I lost both my parents in the last year, and so it's just been a really difficult year. I'm not sort of in an emotional position to take on a tragic story,
Yeah,
make it mine, and write it for the world. So halfway through last year, I declared a break from writing. I told my publisher, I can't write right now. I just need to
yeah,
heal. I need to heal. I need to grieve, and I need to heal. So I'm looking at the future, and I'm sure that there's more books in me somewhere, but I also think that I want to create an opportunity to show people how to write, to create a webinar on how to put out an award-winning book. What are the
yeah.
steps necessary to do that, and some encouragement, because there were a lot of people that helped me with that. And
hmm
so that may be a way I want to give back. So I'm just, I'm kind of opening myself up, and it's a real prayerful kind of a journey right now of what's next for me. How can I
Yeah,
be useful? So we'll see.
yeah.
We'll see.
And sorry to hear about the loss of your parents. I've told you that before, having gone through that.
Mhm.
Both my parents have passed away, and it is really it's something that makes you question everything.
Yeah,
I had a good friend who just lost his dad, and now both of his parents passed away. Described it as feeling like he's an orphan, and I'm like, oh
yeah.
my gosh, I'm like, that's the best way to describe it
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
now it's it just puts you in a different place. But what I love about you being vulnerable and sharing that is you this idea of pushing pause
Hmm.
and experiencing the feelings of life right now
Yeah,
and showing that it's okay to do that. It doesn't mean you're giving up on whatever your gifts and talents are,
right.
but you have to be able to feel those emotions and experience those emotions so that you can continue to carry on later. And it's easier to do that when you're whole and when
Yeah.
you are not trying to process things at the same time.
Hmm.
So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. 'Cause that's, I think, just really good advice too, as to, you know,
Yeah, there are
sometimes,
seasons. There are seasons in our
yeah,
life where we can blast through. I mean, I put out 5 books in 9 years. It's just crazy the amount that I was able to work. And now I'm like, Nope.
Yeah,
I've hit pause and no, there's going to be no book this year. So, and everybody keeps asking me, what's your next book? What next book are you working on? I'm working on me right
yeah,
now. Working on me.
yeah. And
And
that is, just good job. And I
yeah,
think that's I think one of the best pieces of advice that you've given listeners today is remember that there's times and seasons, and
yeah.
because you don't have to. And if you're stuck, it's okay to be stuck for a little bit and to figure it out.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I just appreciate that. Well,
Yeah.
Heidi, I just have appreciated again being able to interview you and to just hear where you're at now and to just be able to share some of your wisdom with our audience. Um, and this is almost your first little webinar where you can just talking about, what things should you do, especially as someone who you've got a full-time job.
Hmm.
How do you navigate this? So I think you've shared some really good things, and I know the listeners will have appreciated it, and I certainly have appreciated it. So thank you so much for being on our show today.
Yeah, absolutely. And if your listeners have other questions, just reach out to me at HeidiTucker.com. There's a way on my website that you can, ask a question, and I'm be happy to talk with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heidi.